everybody. My name is Missy Juniper. I'm visiting with me and my husband, who's not here yet. He asked if I could find the campsite, which I guess is fine. But we're visiting from the south today. Never really have been in the northeastern area before, so this is going to be quite interesting. Alright, let's go find the campsite.
Good morning. My name is Kate Newcomb, and today we will be discussing campsite selection. Our goals for this video are that students will be able to identify the 6 W's of campsite selection. They will be able to list different weather considerations and seasons and how they affect campsite selection, and they will be able to practically apply the 6 W's of campsite selection. The learning styles we will be working on for this video are auditory, visual, and kinesthetic.
Well, this area looks pretty good, pretty flat.
The 6 W's of campsite selection are wind, water, wood, weather, wild things, and willingness. So my acronym for this is wet walruses waddle waspishly while walking. So that's just a little fun way to keep these in mind while selecting your campsite.
Area over here, seems like there's a lot of cover. That's what you need. It's one of the W's. Oh, there's a little deer path right there. Woo. Oh, there's a lot of deer paths. Look at this one. Ooh, we're right in the deer highway zone. This looks like a nice place. We got a lot of cover over here. We don't seem to be too in the way of the animals, the other wildlife. I think this looks pretty nice. It's really flat. Honey, come here. I found us a good campsite. I think you're gonna love it.
For wind, you want to be considering any natural wind breaks you can find in an area where you are going to be putting your campsite, because that'll save you time and energy. For water, you want to consider your proximity to a clean water source while making sure that you're at least 200 feet away, so as to make sure you're not in an area that's going to flood or have too many biting insects. For wood, you're going to want to consider whether you're bringing your own firewood or if you're going to be collecting fallen wood when you get to your campsite, because that will have an effect on what your location is going to be. For weather, you want to consider things like shade, what the forecast is before you go out camping, things like that. For wild things, you want to make sure, as I said previously, that you're not too close to a water source where there's biting insects. You also want to make sure that you're not blocking pathways of any animals such as deer to a water source. And finally, for willingness, you're going to be willing to put in the work and have good risk management principles and be making sure that you're keeping leave no trace in mind during your camping experience. Some tips and tricks to keep in mind for selecting your campsite are to know ahead of time where your campsite will be found, especially if it's in a high traffic area. Some resources you can use for this are guidebooks, the internet, and any available park rangers. You should also get your permit as early as possible, because there's only a certain amount places give out per season, and they can go pretty fast. You'll want to arrive at your site at least 2 hours before sunset, so you have time to set up when there is natural light available to you. You also want to keep in mind to camp on previously impacted areas, just again keeping leave no trace in mind. And you'll also want to be considering others when picking your campsite, just so that you're not too close to another group and negatively impacting their camping experience.
With these W's, we were able to find a pretty nice campsite, and hopefully we're going to have a swell and good time.
We will.
And
with Wi-Fi. Alrighty. So now that we found a place, let's go over the 6 W's.
To review, the 6 W's are wind, water, wood, weather, wild things, and willingness. And keeping in mind that acronym we discussed earlier. And some tips and tricks that encompass what I have shared with you all today are that you should plan your campsites in advance. Watch out for any widow makers, any trees that are in danger of falling when selecting your campsite. You should avoid camping in low spots because, as you remember, heat rises. You don't want to camp too close to water, keeping that 200 feet limit to that. You also want to set up camp before it gets too dark so you have that natural lighting. You want to make sure you're not camping on fragile vegetation, keeping leave no trace in mind. And finally, you want to make sure you're not crowding other groups so that you can all have the best individual experience possible. When winter camping, some things to keep in mind are that you should camp on snow or ground with minimal plant growth so as not to negatively impact the ecosystem. You should camp higher rather than lower, just keeping in mind that heat rises. You'll also want to examine the snow in the area to see if it has been receiving heavy winds. There would be pretty decent-sized striations in the snow if that was the case. You also should be positioning your tent in relation to where the sun will hit first in the morning, because that will help to thaw any ice on your tent, as well as to be a natural way to wake yourself up. And finally, you'll want to be scanning for signs of avalanche activity in the immediate vicinity, just to make sure that you're being as safe as possible.